Hello, friends. Happy Saturday night. We had a fun day. We had a super fun day. We played putt-putt today.
It's true.
Which was a blast. And in a amazing turn of events, Steve won.
Nothing amazing about that.
Well, I mean, when we were playing, it looked like anybody could have won. I won the first 9, but I guess...
There's no winning the first 9.
Yeah.
I won the first half of the basketball game. Is that a betting?
Steve won! Yay! Way to go!
There's a lot of debris because it was a beautiful, really retro miniature golf course, and it's situated. So we're on this mountain, Big Bear. It's really pretty, lots of pine trees and stuff. This is the only only miniature golf course I've ever played where there, and I've played many miniature golf courses where it was situated actually in the woods, and so there's these big beautiful pine trees all over the place, so you have really wonderful shade. But we picked one of 4 or 5 days of the year where the pine trees are
dropping.
Is it dropping? Is that
yeah,
what
that's what the lady
said? And
said.
so they were literally like the she had just swept, but then immediately afterward, there's just pine needles all over, all over the little, green or whatever, the turf. And it was really funny because I think the course is hard enough as it was. Like I've never played a miniature golf course over my life where the hole was so loath to receive the putt-putt ball. Literally, I did one. It was going to be a hole-in-one, and it spat it.
Right out.
Just ejected it. And then everyone was having a problem where like the lip of the hole, you'd go and it would around. And I think that probably happened to everybody.
Yeah. It was fun. It was frustrating. It was delightful. I love it. I've been wanting to do it for weeks now, so it was great. But tonight we want to talk about it's okay to feel your feelings. It's okay to feel bad. It's okay to be annoyed. It's okay to be frustrated. We had a really great question in the German New Medicine Self-Healing Support Group, basically asking about kids, like kids going back to school, and how can I help prevent conflicts with my kids, and that's one of the big things too about like flu season. And what's flu season? That's what are the symptoms of the flu? The flu is, nasal symptoms, sometimes throat symptoms, sometimes a combination, sometimes stomach symptoms on top of it. And basically it's a combination of feeling like this stinks, feeling like I don't want to accept this, I don't want to swallow this, and basically that kind of vibe, that everyone being frustrated, happens when? It happens in the fall time, it happens in the winter. What's going on for the vast majority of people? What's going on? We're at school, and there's like a million activities, and there's holidays, and there's places we have to be, and we still have to work, and somehow we've got to take care of ourselves and eat food and go grocery shopping, and life just gets super hectic and busy for most people in this season that we are, right at the very beginning of. And so like with school, how can I help prevent my kids from getting sick? Well, if you understand German New Medicine, it's not about, spraying them down with Lysol and making sure that, you're clearing away all the bacteria. It's making sure that everyone's got kind of a good way of handling and dealing with their emotions and the things that come up. And one of the things is, okay, so what do you do with these feelings? So if a child is feeling frustrated, if you are feeling frustrated and annoyed about the stuff that you have to do, what do you do with those feelings? Do you shove them away? Do you pretend you're not feeling them? What can we do about feelings that we have that we kind of don't want to have, and we want a better way to deal with, to cope, to not cope because coping is kind of crap. We want to be able to transmute these negative situations and circumstances, and what can you do about that?
Yeah, and I think one of the big things for me is that and I just found this to be true in my life, that permission to feel the way I do is kind of a prerequisite for feeling better. It sort of opens up the door to the possibility of feeling better. And I think it's really important. I want to preface that with an emphasis on the fact that I'm not saying that because I'm a compassionate person or a caring person or a nice person. Although I would like to think that I am those things at least a good part of the time. There's a lot in personal growth about honor. There's a lot of kind of saccharine sweetness, right? There's a lot of kind of support and a lot of the things that aren't necessarily particularly functional, things that sort of give you permission to feel the way you want to feel, and they just kind of give you permission to feel bad, and they just kind of stop it there. They don't then say, it's okay to feel bad now, here if you want to, here's how you can feel good. For me, the reason that I'm like, listen, you're fine to feel the way you do, is that I find for myself, giving myself that experiential space, giving myself that permission to feel as I am at a given moment in time really is a prerequisite for engaging with that reality, the reality of that feeling, the reality of that, feeling depressed or anxious or unhappy or unmotivated or unworthy or whatever it is. If I can give myself the space to feel that way, basically what that means is not resisting. That is my kind of prerequisite to going to work on that feeling. So one of the things is like this permission and acceptance of things, especially things that you don't like. It doesn't mean rolling over. It doesn't mean being passive. It doesn't mean wallowing. That's a huge thing, because I think for a long time I kind of thought it meant wallowing, being true to your feelings and all this. It meant, oh, I really don't like this feeling. Let me keep thinking in the way that's creating this feeling. Let me keep feeling this feeling. Let me keep making this feeling worse. That's really not what it is at all. Really, for me, acceptance is a really proactive engagement with whatever is true at a given moment in time in a way that is designed to, intended to, create more of what I want and less of what I don't. And that is like a really kind of refreshing and cool thing. Like the reason that, and it just happens to be that if you've got a person who's feeling a certain way, especially if that person is yourself, and you don't want to be feeling that way, if you resist that feeling, we tend to think that resistance is a mechanism or a means of changing something. I don't like the fact that the situation's this way, so I'm going to emotionally resist. And I don't know if you know kind of what I mean by emotional resistance, but it's an internal feeling of tension. It's an internal feeling of this isn't okay. Not only do I not want this moving forward, I don't even accept that it's this way right now. I'm completely opposed to this whole thing. I'm so opposed to it. You know what? I'm so opposed to it. It's such bullshit that this thing is this way. I'm not even going to do the things I know I could do to change it because I shouldn't have to, because it should never have been this way in the first place. That's kind of like, for me, what resistance sounds like in my head. And resistance, emotional resistance, tends to create suffering. It tends to create suffering that I then think is due to the situation or the circumstance that I am resisting, when in fact the source of the suffering is my own emotional resistance. But if that resistance is going on outside of awareness, which is the only place that resistance can occur, because if I'm aware of resistance, I'm also aware of what resistance is causing me to create my experience. I'm aware of the fact that I don't want to be suffering, and then the resistance will tend to fall away. I would tend to attribute that suffering, though, to the circumstances, which then does what? It rationalizes resisting it more. It feels even more intuitively right for me to kind of clench my mental and emotional teeth and grind against this thing and just sort of like this about it, and pout. I mean, it's kind of pouting in a way. If I can just say, man, I don't like the way this is going. You know what? I'm really inclined. Not only do I not like this, I really am feeling bad about it. Not only am I feeling bad about it, I'm really inclined to respond to my bad feeling in a way that I know does not serve me, right? I'm feeling right now what I really want to do is something that I know really isn't going to help me right now. Can you avoid resisting that? Can you let that be okay? Can you and that's the important thing, is that as we tend to, I think, figure out how to respond at one level, the resistance kind of goes up a level. And so if we learn how not to if we learn to kind of not resist that other person or that situation or that circumstance, we tend then to do pretty well, except for when we're up at our emotional threshold and it doesn't matter that we know it doesn't serve us, we want to resist anyway. We then kind of resist the idea of resistance, or we resist the fact of our own resistance, and we kind of get caught up in that. It's like this kind of seduction thing. It's like the sort of like the con artist, he asks you if you want to get involved in some kind of a bet, and you say no, and he says, oh, okay, you don't like that one, well, here, maybe you'd like this one instead. You go, oh, that sounds a little bit better. Resistance is constantly trying to con us into doing it. And so that's where this acceptance thing comes in. For me, it's about, I'm constantly conniving, I'm constantly planning to feel better than I do at a given moment in time. It so happens that acceptance, letting it be okay in the moment and for the moment, just that's a very short agreement or span. We're not saying, it's okay to feel, it's okay to engage in patterns, or it's advisable. We're not encouraging you to engage in patterns of thinking that cause you to feel ways you don't want to feel forever. We're saying if you're already feeling some way, you might as well let that be okay, because that really allows you to start the change process. That was a huge thing for me, was recognizing that I had a choice between resisting what was or changing it. That they were not only were they not the same, but they're not even compatible. that if I'm resisting what is, I'm going to tend to perpetuate both the fact and my experience of it. Whereas if I can just kind of like let it be okay, what is out here, also what is inside in relation to out there, the situation some way I don't want it to be, I feel pissed off about that. Can I accept the situation? Can I accept my present moment response to it so that I can then go to work on both of those things? Because I can start going to work on both of those things. There's things I can do about that situation. There's things I can do about that person. There's things I can do about my experience of that person. There's things I can do about my experience of that person. And there's a candor, there's a no-fault policy and clause. I think there's a willingness to accept. There's an infinite and kind of pre-extended grace that allows you to really respond maximally resourcefully. You know what I'm saying? Because it's like if something, it's like in our relationship, like if there's something that I know that you don't want to have happen, and it's my job to prevent it, overdraft or something like that, let's say, and suddenly there's an overdraft, and I know you're not going to be happy about it, so I try to hide it from you, or I try to take care of it myself when you have information or resources that I need to take care of that thing. And as a result of my not feeling comfortable bringing it to your attention right away so we can pool our resources and solve this thing, it grows and grows and gets worse and worse. I mean, it's like, you tell a lie, then you got to do another and another and another. I think we do this within ourselves a lot of the time, where we decide ahead of time it's not okay to feel certain ways. So if we catch ourselves feeling that way, it's not psychologically viable for us just to say, well, shit, I don't want to feel this way. How can I change it? We pretend like we don't feel that way at all, thus missing opportunities to change. I think that's a really kind of a practical kind of illustration of resistance and how it doesn't serve us and how it tends to create suffering and perpetuate the very thing that we're actually resisting.
And a big part of that, I think, for a lot of people is being, feeling like you shouldn't feel the way that you're feeling, or someone even telling you. There's that whole concept of gaslighting, like if a child feels a certain way and you kind of undermine the fact they feel that way, say, you can't feel that way, you shouldn't feel that way, you've got no right to feel that way. And then there's kind of like that, oh, I shouldn't be feeling this way that I'm feeling. And you kind of feel like you don't have permission, you're not allowed to feel certain ways. And so you kind of, shove it down and don't really acknowledge it. You don't really accept it. You feel it, but then there's some part of you that says, I shouldn't be feeling this feeling that I'm feeling. And it's a very conflictive sort of situation. And so that acceptance and acknowledgement, that period for me, when you kind of have a way of dealing with negative feelings when they come up, it can happen so quickly. You can shift so quickly, but there does have to be that kind of acceptance and acknowledgement of like, okay, I feel like I'm in a conflict right now. I feel really frustrated, really annoyed, really like stepped on, really rejected, really alone, whatever the negative feeling that you don't want to be feeling is. The quickness from which you can go to having the feeling, acknowledging, accepting it, not telling yourself that they should be different, I should be different, because that should story is the most difficult thing. That's the thing that really hurts the most. It's not even the bad feeling, because the bad feeling is there, but when it's there and you're telling yourself, I shouldn't be feeling this way, this shouldn't be this way, those people shouldn't be that way, this all shouldn't be happening to me right now. That's the thing that really kind of really gets you, really hurts the most, is the resistance. And the resistance to me is the should story of how things really should be and how they're not, and how that's what makes me more mad than anything. And so that is even an anger on top of the irritation or the frustration or the loneliness or whatever the bad feeling is, or like having to do something you don't think should be your responsibility. It's that layered on top of it. But if you have kind of a like heuristic for how you're going to handle it if you're having a negative feeling, a negative state. And the first thing is acknowledgement and acceptance of that. I don't think the hearts are coming up today.
What's the problem? Yeah.
Sometimes
I love your comment, Willie, about my shirt. It is, in fact, that's actually why I won. I was wearing the shirt today, and I actually had some exercise successes today. I think that we're doing large part to wearing this shirt. It has a power to it. It's my vintage. It's actually my first interesting shirt, I think, that you got for me.
Yes, I did.
Carry on. Sorry.
Yeah, acknowledgement and acceptance of the negative feeling, whatever it is. If that's like your first go-to, is like, oh, okay, and you notice that awareness of your own state, your own emotional state, is so powerful. Because for the longest time, and I actually remember back in chiropractic school, I took an emotional intelligence test. And basically, emotional intelligence is your awareness of emotions in yourself and in other people. Like, how kind of sensitive and aware are you? And I think I scored very low on this test. And it makes sense because I had very low emotional intelligence. Like, I didn't know how I was feeling. That was kind of like my go-to phrase of like, oh, what's going on with you? Is like, I don't know. I had a lot of like complex emotions within me, but I didn't want to acknowledge any of them. It didn't feel like, I felt like I shouldn't be having them. I shouldn't, and I certainly shouldn't express it to anybody else or share these really bad feelings that I'm having inside. And so, my emotional intelligence was very, very low at the time, but it's improved so much, and a big part of that is this awareness of emotions in myself, these feelings that I have, and acceptance of them when they're there. And personally for me is like, I study them. I study, where is this coming from? Why am I feeling this? What is the kind of root cause of this feeling in my life? And that's kind of like the next step. But the first step is acceptance. Let it be okay that you're feeling the way that you're feeling. Don't add a resistance, a should, on top of whatever the negative feeling that you happen to be experiencing.
And I think, again, just to emphasize, for me, acceptance means something totally different than what I can imagine anyone thinking it means, just based on how I hear it used mostly in the world. Acceptance of a feeling, for me, like when I'm with the internal phenomenon of the movement of consciousness that I'm kind of referring to with the sound or the word acceptance, it creates space between me and the thing I'm accepting. It does not bind me together. Acceptance of a feeling, if I'm feeling all pissed off or something like that, and I accept the fact that I'm feeling that way, if here's pissed off and here's me, I start out like this, acceptance puts a little gap in between the two, so I can start going to work on it. And that's one of those things that's huge. I mean, it creates a space, and it's a space that you can then begin to work with. You know what I'm saying? It's like, if you're so close to something, it's like, okay, my refrigerator's not working. What would it mean accepting the fact that this thing isn't working? Well, it would mean acknowledging to myself there is something that is some way other than I would like for it to be. It would mean acknowledging the fact that that shit happens. That was something, I remember I was so liberated when I realized that a part of life was having things be other than I would most ideally like for them to be. And considering the fact that, or the possibility that maybe that's okay. Maybe that's a part of it. And what that began to do for me is it began to create a space. Again, acceptance is a space creating phenomenon. It's like, I'm trying to think about like something that I don't know, in like woodworking or something, if there's like two big heavy pieces of wood that are like smashed together, you can kind of like put something in between it and start cranking it, and it actually creates the space. You know what I'm talking about? I don't know where I saw that happen, but there are these cool things where you pry things open. It's not clamping them together. And that's exactly what acceptance does. And I began, when I started to think, okay, maybe part of life is things going other than I would like for them to be, and me learning to respond more resourcefully to that. And that sounded like a bunch of shit that I didn't want to hear, until I started to consider, maybe my problem with life is not the fact that things sometimes go the way I don't want them to. Maybe my real beef with this whole thing, my real, like the thing I'm really resisting, is the experience that I tend to create as a reaction to things going some way other than I want them to. And then I started to think, maybe it's possible. What if it's possible for things to kind of go some way other than I want them to, and for me to be totally unperturbed by it? What if the dog can get sick in the middle of the night and bark on the floor, and I not be mad about it, or frustrated, or really upset about losing sleep? What if it were possible for me just to see that and say, oh, looks like the dog needs to go out. Oh, need to put this, clean up this mess and stuff like that. Then I started to say, oh boy, there's this whole world, right, of experiential optimization. Like the fact that I experience these things going other than I would like them to, the way that I do now, which involves a lot of resistance, a lot of suffering, a lot of griping, a lot of bombast, a lot of all that stuff. That doesn't mean that's the way I have to experience it. Wouldn't it be wonderful to have things go so? For me, it's almost exhilarating now when something doesn't go quite right, or maybe we'll go. It's kind of a big ordeal for us to go shopping because we live on a mountain, so we drive about like a 2-hour commitment up and down.
There and back, yeah.
And so, like, if we forget something that's really important, in the past, it would have been so easy for me to go, oh God, But it's so exhilarating for me now just to say, well, that's okay. we like driving down the mountain anyway. And it's this freedom. It's like this assertion of autonomy. It's like, I don't have to be the person I was kind of raised to be. Not like my dad sat me down and instructed me to get really frustrated about things, but I witnessed frustration. I witnessed a little bit of resistance. I witnessed the unresourceful engagement with my reality, and I took it on myself, and then it became my thing. And when I started to discover, I don't have to suffer when things don't go the way that I want them to. Suddenly things not going the way that I want them to becomes such a superficial problem that it's a complete transmutation of the experience.
And that's super interesting too. If you are a parent and you do have kids and you're wondering, oh, how can I help my kids, not have conflicts? And the way to do it is by modeling for them, being an example for them. How do you respond when things don't go your way? How do you respond when you have to do something that you don't want to do? How do you respond when, when things are going haywire? How do you respond? That's really the best thing with raising kids. It's not about what you teach them with your words. It's not what you sit down and say to them about how they should act or how they should respond or what would be good or, this is how we can handle this. That's one kind of explicit teaching, but the most powerful teaching is implicit. It's something that you never say in words. It's something that you model, that you act, your very behavior. That's the thing that's going to stick the most for them, because your words will kind of be there with like the teacher's words and the pastor, and you know what I mean? Like the words are one thing, but it truly is. It's the actions. It's how do you handle stressful situations? How do you respond to when you get a phone call and it's, and it's something is going on in your kind of adult world and your kids are just there observing it. They're there, because I received messages of, don't worry, God's in control, we don't worry. But then the actual behavior of the people was like absolute panic, frantic worry, like about everything. There was so much worry, but the words were don't worry, but the actions were worry about everything. And so
just saying don't worry let you know it was time to worry about something.
Yeah, and so for me, what did I get the message of? What was like so deeply ingrained in me was like to worry about everything, because that was the way that the big people handled life, was to worry about stuff. Well, my dad he doesn't really worry about anything.
There's a tension.
She worried enough for everybody,
yeah.
So that, but yeah, so when it comes to kids though, this is so important. Like you've got to, put your own oxygen mask on, do your own thing, figure out your own experience, and that's going to be the best way to help your kids.
So I imagine someone hears that and they say to themselves, oh my God, I worry so much, I'm really messing up with my kid. And you start worrying about the fact that you worry because you now know that worry is going to... And I think the thing there is that's an opportunity. It's so hard, it's so difficult and challenging to apply these principles to the most recent aspect of your experience. You know what I'm saying? It's like because that's a pattern that's built into many of us, is this pattern of feeling like we constantly missed it or we're constantly doing it wrong. Like, oh my God, I literally just worried in front of my kids. Oh, what a and we don't realize that we're now here in this moment worrying. That intellectual understanding can apply to what just happened a couple of minutes ago. Experiential awareness, which is the whole thing that we teach, which is what our coaching is all about and our courses are all about. Awareness allows you to engage with what's happening right here and right now. And that's where the action is, because that's where you can actually do something about it. If I know worry isn't resourceful, but my knowledge can't apply to really what I'm doing right now. It can apply to what I just did, right? I can say, oh God, I was just worrying. Oh man, that's really going to cause problems for me. The knowledge cannot apply itself to the real-time present moment phenomenon. That's an awareness thing. That's knowledge has no jurisdiction here in the present moment. Knowledge is really great for analyzing what I did 5 years ago or 5 minutes ago or 5 seconds ago. Awareness, though, is the thing that allows me to observe what's happening as it's happening and seeing the consequences as they're occurring. And that's why I could get a doctorate in everything that there is to have a doctorate in. And I could tell everyone a whole lot about what they could have done differently 15 minutes ago to create a better life. But a little ounce of awareness goes so much further than all of that knowledge when it comes to creating really substantive improvements in what it's like to be you. Because it allows you to do a little bit of work right now, not 2 seconds ago, not 5 minutes ago, a little bit of work right now, a little bit of course correction right now. That's what awareness allows you to do. It allows you to work in the highest yield place possible, because there is one place where everything happens, and that's right here and right now. And knowledge is essentially, in many respects, a description of what has already happened, whereas awareness is a real-time observation of what's happening now. And you can take the turn as you're approaching the exit. If you know that the exit was the one that was back there after you've missed it, you've already missed it. You know what I'm saying? But if you are aware, oh, here's my exit, well, then you take the exit and everything's cool. And so I think that's a really interesting thing. Something you mentioned about like the gaslighting stuff. So when I was about 3 or 4, I was in KB Toys. I don't know if you guys remember this, but this was like in North America anyway. It was a toy store in the mall. So it wasn't like Toys R Us. It was like a little store in the malls. And they had like a specific type of, like, they had like their own like special deals where they got toys and stuff. And I was an only child, so I was a toy fiend. You know what I mean? I was all about my action figures and stuff. And I remember being in KB Toys one time, and I'm normally in my zone. I have no idea who else is around me. I don't care, because I live for this Friday evening trip to KB Toys. And I'm standing there looking at like these action figures, and I was probably, there was a little girl that was about my age, and she was over here talking about something. It was obviously a high stress situation. There was a classic '90s dad there with the big glasses and everything, and the little girl was pissed off about something, and she goes, I hate this. And she was talking about a brand of toy, like a Barbie or something like that. She hated that kind of Barbie. The dad goes, you don't hate anything. And I remember thinking, I don't know how old, I was young, I was like 3 or 4. I remember thinking, what an asshole. What an asshole. You don't know. Maybe she does hate that. And I remember almost wanting to say to this guy, how do you know? How do you know she doesn't hate that thing? And that's kind of like this whole gaslighting thing. No, if you
that was the language policing thing my parents did too. Like, you don't hate anything.
Well, and I think,
you hate the devil. That was the only thing you were allowed to hate.
Right. Well, maybe it was the demonic toy. I don't know. But I just remember there's something in me that so objected to the oppression of this invalidation of this girl's experience. Not asking her why, not saying, well, do you not like this one better or something like that, or why do you think you feel that way? No, you don't hate anything. It's you saying you're not allowed to hate anything. It's basically saying, listen, you need to modify your internal experience, because in this family, we don't have those feelings. And it's like, well, apparently somebody in this family does. And imagine like how that plays out over time. You know what I'm saying? And this is interesting. So when I'm in a situation like that where I'm not allowed to have certain feelings, what does that require of a little 2 or 3 year old little girl? Because she has a certain amount of intellect, but she's got an incredible mind that's operating and learning about how to navigate her environment safely. And there was some part of her that said, you're going to run into problems if you candidly express that emotion. So what we want to do is we want to create a situation where you don't put yourself in that situation, because she's probably not going to get her toy. The brain is a goal-seeking mechanism. It's avoiding pain, moving towards pleasure. And so it's like, whoop, that was a mistake. Better not do that. The best way to avoid expressing an emotion is to be unaware of the fact that you are having that emotion. That's the best. And there's this partitioning of self that occurs, that if I feel a certain way and it's natural to give expression to how I'm feeling, and somebody around me punishes me or responds very negatively to that expression, rather than saying, hey, you want to learn how to modify that feeling, or gosh, why do you think you're feeling that way? Do you want to change that? We want to change the behavior, because I don't want to raise a little girl who feels good all the time. I want to raise a little girl whose behavior is appropriate. I want to raise a little girl who doesn't talk about hating things. She can hate her neighbors all she wants, but she's just not allowed to say so. There's this partitioning that happens where, and that's one of my biggest things in working with people is like, and this is why awareness is so powerful, because it allows me to figure out what I'm feeling right now. And if I can really observe in real time with perfect clarity how I'm feeling right now, and I can keep watching, what is behind that is how I am feeling that way, not why. Because I can tell why I'm mad because this guy cut me off. That's why. That's not useful, because people are going to probably cut me off in traffic for as long as there's traffic. But if I can become aware of how I'm feeling, and I can start observing how I feel that way, how do I do pissed off? How do I do hating something versus simply just not being interested in it? That's more useful. Do you know what I'm saying? That's a more useful kind of thing. But I'm sort of dealing with, and we're all dealing with, and living in worlds of people, including ourselves, whose parents probably for the most part taught us how not to express negative emotion, rather than how to become aware of these kind of emotions, figure out what's going on, what in the wiring is creating this, what thoughts are giving rise to this thing. What would it take? This is an interesting thing. If a dad were to say to that little girl, what would it take for you to not give a fuck about that, honey? What would it take for you to not be upset about those toys right now? What would have to be true in order for you to not be angry about that? You know what I mean? That would be an interesting question to ask that little girl. And the interesting thing is, just like her brain could go to work becoming unconscious of unpleasant emotions so that they can bubble up in dysfunctional ways and cause all sorts of problems in her relationships going forward, and probably in raising her kids. Because why the hell would she allow her kids to feel bad if she wasn't allowed to feel bad, when she was little? Instead of that, her brain could start figuring out, what would need to be true for me to not be experiencing this negative feeling? Do you know what I'm saying? How could I kind of modify that experience? Acceptance of the experience is a really important part of that. It's got to be okay for me to feel some way I don't want to feel, so I can go to work on that thing, and I don't have to shove it under the bed or shove it in the closet or shove it in a bottle or oh boy, I do a good job being unconscious of how I'm feeling, but someone broke up with me and now I'm really depressed, so I need some alcohol to help me out here, to kind of make me even less conscious than I normally am. All of this stuff makes perfect sense when you understand what's going on. It's like, the brain is seeking an exogenous chemical to exist in its unconsciousness, because that's a strategy that it developed when it was young, when the organism, the child, the person was young, to not get into trouble. And when you recognize that stuff, it's kind of like, well, God, couldn't we do something so much more effective than that? You know what I'm saying? Instead of, I think about like really terrible like body odor, do you know what I mean? And there's all these like really intense aluminum-based, unhealthy, artificial fragrant deodorant and things like that. My thing's like, well, gosh, do I need to smell like that? Why? Maybe that's a dietary thing. Maybe that's a stress thing. Maybe there's something going on with me. Rather than trying to cover it up, rather than trying to cover up the fumes of my unpleasant experience, what if I can actually kind of like make it a pleasant experience, so that I could just talk freely about how I was feeling and actually enrich other people's experience, because my experience itself was enriched. Another thing you mentioned was shouldn't, right? These stories about how I shouldn't be feeling this way rationalizes resistance. So why do we resist things? Because we tell ourselves a story, unconsciously and unintentionally, that makes resistance make sense. The only reason you ever do anything, drinking too much or eating too much or not exercising enough or being a jerk or putting up with jerks or whatever, the only reason anybody ever does anything is that they're able to make sense out of doing it. Do you know what I'm saying? They see a situation, they see a problem inside or out, and then they say to themselves, well, shit, how are we going to work on this? And they look in their toolbox, and they don't have tools that aren't there. There's not tools that aren't there, there's just tools that are, and they pick the best tool available to them for the job. Sometimes that's beating somebody up. Sometimes it's beating themselves up. Sometimes it's drinking too much. Sometimes, you know what I mean? It's whatever. And sometimes the tool's not very effective. I mean, you should see me trying to get into a can when I don't have a can opener. I've got a hammer, I've got a knife, I've got all sorts of things, and it's not particularly effective. It's pretty dangerous. I do hurt myself a fair percentage of the time. That's what a lot of these like coping mechanisms are. They always make sense. Resistance makes sense. If I tell myself a story that makes sense out of resistance, how much sense does it make to then tell myself a story that makes sense out of resisting resistance? Everything you do makes perfect sense when you understand the full context of why you're doing it. Rather than trying to resist doing what makes sense, why not introduce new factors, new variables, new understandings, new thoughts, new beliefs, new thought technologies, new perspectives that cause what makes sense to change? You see, that's that thing. Is it like when you can, willpower is all about learning how to force yourself to not do what makes sense to you. It makes sense for me to eat all 24 of these donuts. I'm going to try to force myself not to do what makes best sense to me. What if we could modify what makes sense to you? As soon as you modify what makes sense to you, and this comes through awareness, this comes through doing the kind of work that we do. When you modify what makes sense to you, the path of least resistance is the path of most resourcefulness. You make those two things one. But what do you have to do? To do that, you have to accept the fact that it makes sense in this moment for me to do things that don't serve me. The problem isn't that you're doing things that don't serve you. The problem's not that I'm doing things that don't serve me. The problem is it makes sense to me to do things that don't serve me. The problem is the fact that it makes sense to me to do things that don't serve me. Rather than trying to change the doing, what if I changed the sense making? Because there are other people in the world that are making sense out of not doing what I'm doing. There's other people in the world that are making sense out of doing things that I'm not doing, things that I perhaps want to be doing. If I can find out how they do it, you know what I'm saying? And if I can see what's different between them and me, but I've got this person, this thing happened to me when I'm young and that didn't happen to them. Well, that doesn't matter. All that matters is what you're thinking now. Things that happened in the past are only relevant in as much as they're influencing things that are happening now. Knowledge of one's personal history does not create any kind of a change. You know what does? Awareness. Awareness creates change, because when you see here and now what's happening here and now, this is the portal, it's the doorway through which these past traumas influence our current reality. And so if you can see that, it doesn't matter what happened in the past. What happens in the past has to manifest in certain patterns of thinking and feeling and behaving here and now. And if you can catch those things, then you can go to work on those things. Instead of saying, well, I can't change the past. Well, no, but you control the doorway, the gateway, the portal into present moment experience, which is what's happening now. And if you guard that door, and if you only let in the right things, it doesn't matter what happened in the past. There's no access to you. It's the present moment is the only doorway through which the past has access to you. And if you know, and what I mean by that is that if somebody beat me up, my dad beat me up when I was younger. This didn't happen for me. I mean, not like, I mean, I got a little, I probably deserve a little smack here and there, but like I was not physically abused when I was growing up. But if my dad did physically abuse me, and I say, well, that's why I'm drinking so much now, that's why I'm abusing my kids now. Okay, in what way is what happened then influencing what I'm thinking, feeling, doing now? That's what to watch out for. Because I say shit to myself as a result of what happened then, and I believe that stuff. That is what generates a present moment behavior. If I can change my experience of what's happening now, if I can say the same things to myself that I've always said to myself as a result of having been abused, and then I can add a second thing, which is, wait a minute, that's bullshit. Or, whoa, this is how I make sense out of abusing my kids. This is how I make sense out of, then all of a sudden the whole thing unravels. But you have to do what? You have to have the space to accept the fact. You know what I'm saying? Acceptance will create that space between you and what it makes sense to do right now that's not serving you. And then you can start going to work on the fact that it makes sense to you, and you can make it not make sense anymore. And when it doesn't make sense anymore, you just don't do it.
Yeah, and that is how I've gotten rid of worry, of like my habit, deeply ingrained habit to worry about shit. Like that is like my go-to thing, worry. And so I stopped because it made so much sense to worry, because that was like my go-to. It was like, well, things could go wrong. There's some variables out there. There's some things that could happen that I don't want to have happen. And so the fact that those things exist, it made sense to me to think about them, to mull them over, to resist them, to like cross my fingers, to hope they don't happen. And it's this combination of pictures in my mind of the thing going the bad way with the red X over it, of like, oh, I don't want this to happen. There's this whole layer of like praying to God and propitiating, like, oh, what do I need to do? Was I good enough? Am I going to be able to avert this crisis, this bad thing from happening? If I think the right things, did I think enough of the right things yet? Oh, now I'm worried that I didn't do it early enough. I should have started, praying about this or worrying about this in this way earlier. And
oh shit, is it Thursday? I was supposed to start worrying on Wednesday.
Yeah, but see, that's the thing is if there were so many layers, and it just made so much sense to me. And a lot of times I'll even notice that's my first, the thing happens, first feeling is worry. First feeling is like an intense feeling of worry. And so this acceptance, this creating that space, this going to work on that experience, it all comes into play. And I have gotten really good at creating that space, realizing that in the million times I've worried, it's never gotten me what I've wanted. It's always felt bad while it's happening. If the thing goes, and here's the thing too, is when you're worrying, you are literally praying for the thing you don't want. You are asking for it. When you forget about energy, and you forget about the fact that you create what you focus on, when you don't realize that, you making these pictures is you putting in a request to the universe of, I want things to go this way. A really great example of this the other day, and it's easier when it's not happening to you directly. If it's happening to you maybe indirectly, there's this drama going on with my family that I found out about a few days ago, and it was pretty potentially serious drama. And of course I get the news that my mom's worried about it, and my brother, who has a lot of my mom's patterns, is really worried about it too. And so there's kind of a lot of worry. My dad, who's pretty chill about things, wasn't really too worried about it, but for me, I immediately, so what is it? You make these pictures in your mind of the thing going the bad way, and all the cascade of horrible things that could happen, and what if this, and what if that? And you realize, oh, I'm making those pictures. I'm requesting that in some way by putting these thoughts in my mind, or a request for this thing to happen. And if right there and then you take all of those thoughts captive, you imagine how you want the situation to turn out. You imagine exactly how you want it to turn out, and you lock it in. you lock it in. You say, it's gonna turn out this way. It's gonna be totally fine. You know, this all is gonna go away. It's gonna be like it never happened. Everything's gonna be perfect. And you lock that feeling in, and you like have faith in your imagination, because your imagination is what creates reality. And so what you're imagining will become true because it already is true. And so that's where, like, when you really get how this stuff works, when you really understand your own creative capacity, that it's not a pipe dream. It's not like, oh, you know, if you pray, most of the time it's going to come true. Like, if you really start believing that your imagination is the only reality, and you really trust and believe that when you imagine something, when you imagine an outcome, that it is, like, it is finished. Like, it is a done deal. You know, it's like the seed in the ground is as sure and certain as the pumpkin. You know what I mean? Like, it is going to sprout in your world, and you not doubting it and you staying locked in. Because if you keep imagining, you just know, I already planted that seed. I know I'm getting this pumpkin. There's just no two ways about it. Like, this is how it happens. This is the law of the universe. And so you worrying, remember we talked about this the other day, you worrying is you digging up the pumpkin seed, and you know, you're not going to get the pumpkin if you dig up the seed. And if you're worried about it, that means you're making pictures of no pumpkin. You know what I mean? But if you are like, you know, and you trust and you have confidence and you understand that imagining the pumpkin, knowing that it's coming, knowing that you planted the seed in the ground, it's all one thing, then you don't have to worry. But worry, you know, it's a sign that you don't trust your own imagination. You don't trust the things that you're creating. But yeah, so I found out about this thing the other day. I was like, oh, you know what? And this is a story I'm telling myself. I'm really good. I'm really, really good at creating outcomes. And I was like, oh, you know what? I was like texting my family and just saying, listen, it's done. This thing is totally taken care of. Don't worry about it. See it, it's finished. Like, I locked it in. I was like, oh, this thing, it's done. Like, this thing that we're worried about, as it's going to go away. And I got a phone call today. Guess what happened? Problem gone. Problem is gone. This thing that, you know, was potentially could have been really, you know, bad for them, completely gone. And I know that, you know, my confidence and my faith played a huge role in that happening, you know? And so it was such a fun thing. And you got to tell yourself that you're really good at this, you know? And that's been a huge game changer for me, is just telling myself, I'm really freaking good at this. I know how to create things in my experience. If I want something, I can lock it in and I can create it. And, you know, I didn't always have that confidence and that swagger, but kind of like, you've got to go there first. You've got to go to that confidence place first, and then you will see the fruits of it. And it's a really cool process.
Yeah. As you were describing this whole imagination thing, something interesting came up for me. This is an issue that I've been kind of working with. I've been noticing in people and noticing in myself a lot lately, which is if I've got a pattern, right? And a pattern is a kind of like a content-free. It's like no matter what is going on or what happens, I've got a certain way of interacting with information. I've got a certain way of interacting with situations. I have a certain way of interacting with whatever's going on that reliably produces predictable, experiential, internal feeling, emotional outcomes and external situation, circumstance, feedback, result outcomes. That's what a pattern is. It's to say it operates in the background and it determines the outcome of all the various things that happen in our life. So, for example, well, my friend borrowed something from me and didn't give it back, and now I'm all pissed off at them. And my neighbor, he plays his music too loud, and he said he wouldn't, but he does anyway, and I'm all pissed off at him. And then someone cut me off in trade, and I'm all pissed off at them. And what's the pattern? Well, the pattern is aggrieved. The pattern is focusing on what I don't want. The pattern is the net result. I'm going to be all pissed off at everyone all the time, pretty much, mostly. And if I can notice that, I can start to go to work on that and cease to be distracted by the content. An interesting thing, though, if I have a pattern of always feeling that I'm doing everything wrong, whatever is right to do, I find some way to miss that mark. That it's part of my self-concept. It's a pattern operating in the background of my consciousness. And someone comes along and says, listen, all the stuff you're worried about, you don't need to worry about that. Your imagination creates reality. All you have to do is just imagine what you want. If I introduce, that's information, what I just said. If I introduce that information into the pattern of I always mess things up, I always get things wrong, all I have done is I've given you a new way to get things wrong. Well, all I have to do is just I have to fail to imagine what I want. I have to spend a lot of time imagining what I don't want. Information that's introduced into a pattern The pattern goes to work on the information. The information does not go to work on the pattern. So if my pattern is I do everything wrong and someone introduces information about imagination being the solution to the problem, my pattern called I always get things wrong will go to work on that information and say, okay, what does getting things wrong look like here? It looks like imagining the wrong things. Okay, that's what we're going to do. Rather than the information changing the pattern. The information will never change the pattern. You know what will change the pattern is awareness. This is the power of awareness. Awareness goes to work on the pattern. It deconstructs the pattern. It's the only thing that goes to work on the pattern. It's the only thing that will neutralize that. It's like, you know what it is? This is really interesting. It's like if you got a vat of acid, these patterns are tough. They're like acid. I can put metal into that acid's going to go to work on it. The metal's not going to disturb the acid's going to disturb the metal. It's going to eat it up, it's going to dissolve it, right? That's all the personal growth books we've been reading, right? I got these patterns and I'm pouring in all this great information. Those patterns are like acid, just eat it away. There's nothing left. You would never know you put anything in there. Awareness, though, is like introducing a base, like a neutralizer, like a really strong base. You know what happens like if you put a base inside of an acid is that it actually neutralizes it. It makes it so that it's not dangerous anymore. There are certain plastics that you can put inside of acid, or that can actually contain an acid, and just the nature of their orientation, the acid can't go to work on them. And so the trick is, how do we introduce something into your patterns that are going to short circuit the pattern? Because I can put gold, I can put platinum, I can put the most high quality information. I wrote a really great personal growth book. Aren't you impressed? It's really great. Why do people go to Tony Robbins seminars and they don't turn out like Tony Robbins? Well, you know what I'm saying? Because if you got a tenacious pattern, what happens? You introduce really great quality information. There's nothing wrong with that information. The pattern eats it up. The pattern goes to work on it. The pattern dissolves it, literally, and renders it completely worthless. It's nothing. You have to neutralize the pattern first, then start introducing that other stuff. And so just notice that. Just notice that when someone says to you, oh, just imagine the outcomes that you want. Watch how you respond to that. Watch how you react to that. Moving forward over the next several days, as you make an effort to imagine outcomes that you want rather than just worrying about what you don't want, notice what tends to happen. Notice if you do it incorrectly, what's the natural thing to say to yourself when you notice that you've done it incorrectly, or when you've noticed that you've been imagining in some way that isn't serving you. How do you respond to that? How do you respond to noticing your response of, how you responded to having messed up the whole imagination thing? That's the pattern level stuff. When you start watching that, it becomes very powerful. And I was just noting too, as you were talking about, when we're talking about making sense out of doing things, we're not talking about making rational sense out of doing things. Really interesting, there's a book, it's called, Thinking Fast and Slow. And there's this interesting idea about how our brain works and how our mind works. And, we think that what happens is we understand a situation and then we feel in response to that understanding. But the reality is, most of the time, we form our emotional decision before we form our intellectual decision. The emotional decision, the experience, the feeling exists first. And then we rationalize it. The thoughtful part of the mind goes to work rationalizing the fact that we feel the way that we do.
It's like the limbic system first. Yeah.
It just gets there first. Its wiring is older. It's got better real estate. Its connection is there. It finishes its work first. And it's like, okay, well, whoever gets done first gets to decide how things are going to go, and the other person has to adjust. The emotional part gets done first. The intellectual part has to just basically explain. It's as if the emotional part is the criminal, and the intellectual part is its attorney. You see, so my limbic system is like the deviant, right? He's always knocking over liquor stores and stealing ATMs and stuff like that. And my intellect is my attorney. And so the attorney doesn't decide what the criminal is going to do. He just represents him to the best of his ability, which basically means I'm grumping around being an asshole, and Melissa says, what's going on? And I say, well, you did da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And I switch from criminal, right, emotional part, to the intellectual part, and I explain, I make a case. Oh, Your Honor, don't you understand? And my client had no choice but to behave this way because ba-da-da-da-da-da-da-da, Exhibit A and Exhibit B, and it's all bullshit. And one of the really important things to notice is that it's bullshit, so that you can't bullshit yourself, or at least you don't have to. There's immense freedom, right? When you're free from that, it's a very powerful thing. And so when we're talking about making sense out of doing this stuff, what does it look like? What does it feel like? What does it sound like to make sense out of doing something that doesn't serve you? To be working yourself up to doing something that doesn't serve you, to be rationalizing it. Because probably it's not, and this is why intellectual insight doesn't really change things. It's because the fire has already started, and the intellect just kind of like channels it. It just kind of, its responsibility is like finding out, okay, who's weak enough and who's willing to take this. I'm going to offload some negative emotion here. Who do I have a gripe with? Who do I have a beef with? Who can I vent this on? You know what I'm saying? And get away with it. Well, he deserves it, but he's pretty big. She doesn't deserve it, but she's vulnerable, and she also has issues that make her think she deserves having people shit on her, so I'm going to go for her. That is what that part of the mind does. And observing all of that, awareness kind of exists apart from it. It's sort of almost like a spiritual kind of thing. The ability to watch and to see all of that, it gives you freedom from the you that you seem to be but really aren't. It allows you to be the you that you really are. Because none of the stuff that you're doing that you don't want to do, it's not really you. They're just patterns. And when you can observe them, you can begin to neutralize them. Resisting them does not, just perpetuates it. Resisting is, resisting a pattern, resisting a negative emotion is like, I don't like the fact that fire is burning, so I'm going to throw some wood on it because I'm so angry. I'm going to throw some wood and I'm going to crumple up my newspaper. I'm going to throw it at that fire to express how angry I am at it and how pissed off I am about it. It's going to tend to it's going to get more and more and more. You don't smother a fire. A raging, roaring fire, you don't really smother with flammable material, which is what resistance is. You just watch it. You observe it. You know what I'm saying? You notice what's going on. Oh, this seems to be feeding it. This seems to have a different effect on it. That observation, it's that benign neglect people feel. Don't you, when you are working on worry, don't you feel like you're so irresponsible because there's a part of you that's watching worry rather than doing the worrying? Mm-hmm. We need all hands on the worry deck here because we're on like a 10 out of 10 worry, and there's some part that's not doing its job. It's not towing the line. It's watching and it's questioning the process. That's what turns like companies around. Like so many companies, so many corporations get into a lot of trouble because everyone's just we got to do this and we got ABC priority codes and all this different stuff. Nobody says, wait a minute, why are we doing all this? Why do we have to get those TPS reports out? Why does everyone need to come to this meeting? Why? What's the purpose of that? You know what? That's why companies hire consultants who don't really do anything but show up, look around, watch, and ask why. That's what awareness is. Awareness is like hiring a consultant, not another person that's going to keep doing the same shit everyone else in your corporation, your experiential corporation is already doing. Let's get someone from the outside who can say, God, you seem to be spending a lot of time doing that. What's that about? And nobody in the corporation has any idea whatsoever. It started for some reason because it was a good idea. Well, we had a meeting. We started having these meetings because about 15 years ago we needed to revamp the so-and-so line. And you know what? The meetings just kind of kept going. That's how these patterns work. When I was growing up, my dad was kind of an idiot. He told me that I didn't hate anything, and that made me think that I wasn't allowed to feel that feeling. And so the best thing I could do was become not aware of it. And so I got really good at being not aware of how I was feeling. That then led to problems in my personal life, my romantic life, my professional life. Maybe we could cancel the fucking meeting. You know what I'm saying? The meeting's not serving us anymore. And then everyone just says, oh, you know what? Yeah, you're right. Let's cancel that meeting. It's dumb. It's a waste of time, and it's actually taking away from more resourceful things. That's what it is. Awareness is a consultant. I can't believe it's taken me that long to figure it out. But it's a really powerful thing.
I feel like you've actually described it that way before.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
It's new to me.
Yeah, and that's what it is. It's your, an outside onlooker to say, why and how do I go about creating worry? Why and how do I go about creating this experience? And it's so much different, and that's where you have this full permission to feel however you feel, and it's not really like when it comes to conflicts and stuff, it's not really about doing all that you can to prevent them from ever happening, because that's like preventing to live life. Preventing, just life from happening isn't possible, and trying to do it is frustrating because it's not possible. It's how do we become aware of our own responses to life? How do we teach our children to become aware of their own responses to life, not by shutting it down, not by saying you don't feel that way, not by, giving them candy so they, stop feeling, get distracted by food or some kind of substance. It's why and how, that non-judgmental, just watcher who's watching, who's observing, who's seeing what's going on, this experiential consultant, who's looking at how am I creating this experience? What am I telling myself is true? What's the story? What's the belief? It's just kind of all of the stuff that we talk about in pretty much every one of our videos. It really just comes down to that essence of awareness, of understanding where does this come from? How am I creating this? And how can I to create something different, because that's all it is. It's like a rearranging the arrangement of your mind, the way you're thinking about what you're thinking about, the stories, the things that you're believing, and really there's no way around doing that work. That's the work that needs to be done, is watching and seeing and experiencing and getting it at deeper and deeper levels.
And for a period of time too, and the thing for me, like when I first started doing all this stuff, I wasn't just like, oh, let me be a vegetable and watch everything until I figure everything out. I said, let me do my best to engage dynamically in the ways I know how. Let me do my best to focus my mind on what I want. Let me do my best to be productive. Let me do my best to do all the things that I'm intending to do that I feel like I know I want to do. But let me also watch as I do my best effort to do those things, and let me see what gets in the way. Let me see what makes the difference between me at my best and me at my not my best. What makes the difference between when doing the things that serve me as a breeze versus when it's impossibility. What makes that difference? And so awareness for me is not like a substitute for the rest of the stuff. It's just bring the consultant in, bring the coach in, so that you're working out in the gym. Let's find out if all of that effort is being maximally channeled. If it's possible to do a hell of a lot of work and not get a lot of results. I mean, efficiency is a real thing. Effectiveness is a real thing. And that's one of the big things is that we tend to think that it's the effort that gets us the stuff, but it's not. I mean, effort is a necessary but not a sufficient ingredient for creating what we want in life. It's like people think, if you look at like a recipe for success or a recipe for the life that you want, it's like, okay, well, we need 4 parts awareness, we need this many parts enthusiasm, we need this many parts inspiration, we need da-da-da-da-da, oh, and a dash of effort. And I go to my pantry and I'm like, well, shit. I don't have any inspiration. I don't have any motive. I don't have any. But I got effort. I got this body. I can run this body into the ground, and I got a mental body I can run into the ground too. So instead of using baking soda or baking flour and sugar and icing and all the lovely things that make a good cake, I'm just going to put all baking powder in it. I'm going to see what happens. I'm going to mix it, and I'm going to put it in the oven for 350. And I'm going to really expect that a full cake is going to come out. It's like, no, it is true. You do need a dash of effort. It is a part of the thing. But there are other ingredients in play, and you need to go to the store. Do you know what I'm saying? You need to find someone who can help you with this stuff. If you don't have those ingredients, it will save you a lot of trouble. I mean, it really will. I try to bake single ingredient cakes for a really long time, and you know what I got to do? At the end, I got to say, look how hard I tried. Personal growth doesn't work. The world is just a really rough place. It's like, no, I was trying really hard, but what I was doing was stupid. I was trying really hard to do something ridiculous, and the outcome reflected that. It didn't reflect me or what I was capable of or what I was deserving of or what was possible for me. It didn't reflect any of those things, but it reflected what I did. Awareness allowed me to see that. Awareness allowed me to see, oh, you know what, man. It allowed me to kind of dissolve those presuppositions. But that's the thing too, is that like, you bake that really awful cake that is made only out of effort, and then when it doesn't turn out right, I say to myself, I guess I didn't put enough effort in there. Yes, next time I'm going to use 8 times as much baking powder, only that, inside a tray, and I'm going to put it in the oven, and maybe then the cake will turn out right, and then it doesn't. And then you say, I guess it's just not, I've tried, and then you feel so justified though in doing what doesn't, because you're so exhausted and you're so broken and you're so hurt and you're so tired and you feel like you should be compensated for all of this effort. I mean, I know I did, but the reality was that the ingredients were not there. You know what I'm saying? And it's like getting the cake you want means finding the right balance of ingredients combined in the right order, in the right way, mixed, and then baked for the right period. It does take some time. It does take some heat. That stuff is a part of it, right? But getting the ingredients in play is the first big thing. Liberate from what does not work. I mean, that's the amazing thing. And it's like, oh, of course. You know what I'm saying? When it starts making sense to you in this way, it's just so clear. It's just so obvious, and that's how really creating the life that you want is. It's when patterns complicate, but when it comes to really creating the life that you want, and when you have access to your resources, there is an ease that comes. It's not necessarily easy. It's not that there's no difficulty, and we don't want things to be easy. We get bored when things are easy. We were offended. I mean, why didn't you go to Kmart today and buy a 12-piece puzzle and put it together tonight? Like this little, with the little, you can have like the little knobs, you know? Well, because it's too easy. You don't want easy. You want a certain level of ease. You know, it's like, I mean, I'm
People
out.
go to Target, not Kmart, Steve.
Well, not us, because we live on a mountain and all there is a Kmart. So we went to Kmart. But you know what I'm saying, though? It's like what we oftentimes think we want something other than what we do because we have consistently created negative experiences of doing certain things. We think we don't want to do those things when really what we don't want is that negative experience. And once we find that, I'm then free to not believe that I don't want to do things that I have to do to get the stuff I want. I'm then free to realize that I can create really positive and empowering experiences of traversing the bridges of incident that will carry me to the outcomes that I want to create. And that's just a really powerful thing. There's something else I was going to talk about. I forgot.
Kim says that she has become one of your analogy groupies, and you're really getting your bang for your buck tonight because you've got a lot of them.
I know. Have I forgotten any?
That's really good.
I like the food ones. You know?
Yeah.
The hilarious thing about that is that I don't think I've ever baked a cake in my life. You know? But it's like, I understand. I understand it. And it makes, you know, it makes so much sense. And that's the thing is that there's so many, oh, you know what? It was about the guy. It was about the guy talking to his daughter in the KB toy store. There was something that made a lot of sense to me that I wanted to go on now. It's a lot of pressure. Stop. Go do something else for a second. Let me think of it. No. No, I don't remember what it was, but it's this awareness thing, this watching thing, this creating changes in our experience. And I mean, this is a master skill, and it's something that no one ever taught us how to do. Once you start figuring out how to do this, though, it's amazing what can shift. It really is. When you discover that you can start shifting your experience in a complete no bullshit way. I'm not asking you to ever do anything that you cannot, with integrity and authenticity, do in a given moment in time. I got to reiterate that more often, because I think about what old me would have heard, and old me would have heard, you're just not feeling it. It's Wednesday. You got to go to a job you may or may not like that much. You got family that may or may not be that cooperative. You know, there's a lot of things that aren't the way that you really, really, really want them to be, and then I feel like I'm obligated to feel some way other than I actually do, in order to change that stuff. And I can't actually change how I feel, but maybe I could pretend that I feel different. Maybe that's what he's asking me to do, and that's not it. That's not it. When I thought that was it, it didn't work for me. It really is watching, and it's really saying everything about what it's like to be me. It's not just happening. There's stuff I'm doing. And I don't realize I'm doing this stuff. But there are things that you do, right? There are things that you do predictably. There are things that I do predictably. Some of them serve me and some of them don't. There's some little things that I'll do, little choices, little decisions about behaviors, one of the things that gets me in a lot of trouble is I can get away with it. I can get away with not stretching this morning. I don't need to do my mobility this morning. I don't need to do it. This is just basically you sub in the stuff that makes you feel good, the stuff that gives you drive, the stuff that kind of raises your emotional threshold, the stuff that makes you kind of make it easier for you to respond resourcefully to stuff. There's a version of me that starts thinking about what I can get away with not doing. You know, like before coffee time, I don't need to do those movements. Let me just sit down. And I can get away with that. That's true. And I can get away with the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. But what I can't get away with is the totality of those things. And I find myself in a place experientially where I don't want to be. And then I've got to leverage myself, and I've got to figure a way to get out of that. Watching how you're doing, like whatever's not going right for you, observing it, watching it, right? It's not about it being your fault. It's about, here's this life, here's this experience, and like every moment I feel like I'm waking up in a life that I didn't create. It feels that way to me. It's like I'm just showing up here. Before we started doing this video, I wasn't really that into doing the video. I was kind of like, I'm kind of hungry, I'm kind of tired, I'm kind of this and all these kind of like mealy kind of like feelings. But I knew you wanted to talk about how I was like, let's just get the video started. I want to talk about what we're going to talk about, because I know if I can start talking and actually doing it, it's going to be great. I didn't earn the really great state that I'm in right now. I just kind of woke up in it. I just showed up. The half-life on the me I'm experiencing myself to be right now started when I couldn't remember the last example. I don't know, all the me's that came before that created this place, and I'm just kind of dealing with the mess. Does it ever feel that way in life? You wake up and it's like, it feels like you didn't create it. It's like, listen, I'm just the one on the job today. I'm just the one whose responsibility is to be Steve, to be Kim, to be Melissa, to be whoever. That's how and one of the things for me is like recognizing, embracing that feeling, playing it up even, and saying, okay, look, Steve yesterday left a mess. And there's a lot of things he didn't do and a lot of things he did do that, what a jerk. He did not do his future self, who was me, a favor. My only job is just to respond resourcefully to that. That's it. I don't have to fix all of this stuff. I don't have to fix all this stuff. I don't have to make it other than it is. It's not my job. It's not my job to somehow rip a hole in time and make 14 Steves ago do that thing rather than not, or not do that thing rather than doing it. My job is just to respond resourcefully to what is. What's true, given that, what do I want? And when you start doing that, you start giving. It's like, you can only do a certain amount in a lifetime. And for me, it's like sometimes a lifetime is a moment. I mean, a moment, sometimes, you ever been to the DMV? Sometimes a moment really is an entire lifetime. When I just make it my job just to respond resourcefully now, I don't have to clean up everything. Let me just pick up the clothes off the floor. Let me, you know what I'm saying? Let me just wash those dishes. Let me just do this thing. We don't have to do everything. I don't have to do my whole workout today. Let me just pick up the weight once. Then all of a sudden, the next you really appreciates the fact that that was done. The next you appreciates the former you for doing it. And then that you says, well, what about the next me? I want the next me to have this good feeling too. It's like a pay it forward sort of thing. What will feel good to have done? You know what I'm saying? That's a really powerful question. All of this stuff I discovered for myself through awareness. Basically, this is the mirror image of everything I used to do. I used to not do my future self a favor. I used to go, fuck that guy. It's not my problem. You know what I'm saying? I was indifferent to future versions of myself. I was hostile towards past versions of myself. They didn't do me right, and so I didn't care. I mean, and you can see like generational trauma play out in your own daily life, because former you didn't take care of things, and so you don't feel like you want to take care of things, and you don't even care about the fact that future you is going to wish that you had. My dad didn't really do nice things for me, and so I don't feel up to taking care of my kids the way I really want to, and that's just their problem, because that's just the way life is. I mean, it's like a micro-macrocosm kind of thing. But awareness, when you see that, you say, holy shit, I don't want to do that. You see a small decision as a microcosm of a big decision. And when you see it, you know what I'm saying, when you just observe it, it's different. It makes sense to do something different. It makes sense to you. You know what I'm saying? Like, it doesn't have to. If there's like, I remember one time my dad and I were driving home from somewhere, and it was a 4-lane road with a big grass space in the middle. And I think I mentioned in the last video, I was a big fan of money from an early age. There was just money strewn out. Oh, and we didn't have a lot of money at this time. Especially my dad and my mom had just gotten divorced and all this stuff, and we were living with his parents in their basement, right? And so literally finding a bag full of cash laying on the median of the road, it was a big deal. My dad pulls the car off to the side of the road, and I'm like 4 or 5. I'm jumping out of the car. I'm trying to snatch this money up before he does, and he wouldn't let me, obviously, because he was a halfway responsible parent. This is a busy road, But I remember as a kid, it never occurred to me that I might get run over or anything like that. There's fucking money in the middle of the road. What are you kidding me? This never happens. And it made so much sense to me to get out there and grab it up. And when that's what each moment becomes for you, you begin to recognize the money in the moment. You begin to feel it. You don't not feel it and then try. It's easier to rationalize a feeling than it is to feel a rationalization. It's easier to you know what I'm saying, to explain how you're feeling than it is to feel an understanding or an explanation. When you're in the place where you kind of are creating within yourself an experience of grabbing up that money, every moment there's money. It's an opportunity rather than a necessity. It's I want to, and how much, this is like when I stay up till 11:30 or 12 o'clock at night, and I'm doing one little thing after the other, and you're like, God, I just wish you go to bed, you know what I mean? But it's like, once you get it, it's just kind of like there's another. And then someone else comes, we had the guy that we're renting this place from, he came over and had dinner with us last night. He's a really cool guy. He's probably like your best friend now. And he said something, no one's told me this for a while. He's like, oh, you seem really disciplined. You seem like you're a super. And there's a certain smirk that comes across my face when someone says that, because it's such bullshit, because I don't experience it as discipline at all. He's referring to a state of consciousness that I get in sometimes than anyone could get in, and I'm sure that you get in sometimes, but you can learn to get in all the time, where it's just so easy to pick and reach for the fruit of the moment. You know what I'm saying? To get that money. You know what I'm saying? If there was money out in your front yard, you wouldn't. You think that you'd have to say, "Well, I love this video and I'd love to get that money, but I'm not going to get up." You know what I'm saying? No, you'll be gone. You know what I'm saying? The number would be there. We'd see that you were there, but you would not be there. You know what I'm saying? Make it that easy. I mean, awareness doesn't it?
It does. It really does.
When you start seeing it, when you get a taste for it, when you get, you know what I'm saying? It's like when they talk about animals and pets, that if they eat blood, if they get blood, like raw food, their demeanor changes. I mean, I know Shmuel's demeanor changed when we started feeding him like raw animal, like it's different. There's a quickening. There's blood in the water, kind of shark sort of thing in every moment. It's lean, it's mean. It's an enlivened, enriched, healthy kind of predatory way to be feeling. You're not hunting other people. You're hunting the moment. You know what I'm saying? You're
just kind of ruthless about your experience. And
Yeah.
there is like that. I mean,
There's no Ruth.
There's like a really good, there's a really good state. I do like that too. And I get into that zone where I'm kind of like ruthless with my own bullshit, where it's just like, no, I'm going, like, I see the fruit. I see the good actions that I know are going to serve my future self. You know what I mean? And you're just kind of, there's no question about it. There's no question about what's the right action. What should I do? There's no wobbling, which, I mean, I would get caught in that wobble zone for so long. Oh, I just, you know what I mean? You don't feel enough one way or another. It's just being ruthless. And, and that wobbling for me was a pattern. And I couldn't see it until I was apart from it, until I watched it happen enough number of times to see, oh, that's how I do this wobbling, indecisive. Oh, you know what I used to say? I'm just an indecisive person. WTF is an indecisive person. It's a person who is doing indecisive. And so I had to figure out how I do indecisive and be ruthless with that and say, oh, I don't like the results. I don't like the way that feels. And that's like that. There's like this vigor that it takes. There's like this passion, this kind of like spark of like, I want more. I want better. I want, that really good state I was in like 3 weeks ago. I want that every day, and in figuring out what was that day made out of. I do that in my journaling a lot. I was like, today was effing great. Like, we had a really stellar day. Like, we were like on all cylinders. Like, what was that made out of? What were the elements that went into that? Because a lot of us will just have a day like that and we'll just say, oh, like, I was blessed by the gods today.
It's not a hard effort if you're going throughout your day and you're like, oh, here's a person. You find the most attractive person that you've ever seen in your life, or a person that appeals to you more than anyone else ever. You don't have to make an effort really to give that person more attention. You know what I'm saying? If there's like a line, if there's like 10 people in a room and there's one person that you really like and everyone else you feel neutral about, it's effortless to give more attention to that person.
Right.
To know, what is it about that? What's going on there? Pay attention to those positive states. That's like a David Allen thing. It's just really cool. It's like when we're in those really peak states, we tend to assume we'll always be there. But it's like, mountains and valleys. And when you're up on the mountain, it's the time to look and say, okay, where's the next mountain I'm going to? So that you kind of chart that path, figure out what's going on. So that when you're down in the valley, you don't have that perspective. You know that perspective exists. That's a very powerful thing. We're not always feeling it, but we know the feeling always is there. We know the feeling's always accessible to us. We know that it's our job to find the feeling. The feeling's always available to us. And it feels better to not feel it when you know that you could be feeling it if you found a way. And that you know that there is a way to be feeling it. That because then you're on the hunt again. You're hungry, and it's fun to hunt. There's a certain amount of hunger that's fun. There's a certain amount that's like, okay, all right, yeah, whatever, I'll give you some food. Even then, when you know that the food is there, when you know that the feeling is there, the state is there, the outcome is there, the result is there, all those things, they exist to be found by you, you'll never stop looking. It's only when you begin to believe that it doesn't exist that you stop looking. And that you give up, or that you even feel like it. So this is really interesting. You talk about you said, I'm an indecisive person. So then the question is, how do I do indecisive? Another interesting way, because that's kind of a weird question, but it's meant to be weird because the reason that it seems weird is that it's different, and the reason that it's effective is that it's different because it involves percolating the brain in a different way. It involves asking the brain to bend that way rather than this way. Like a piece of paper, we want to fold it this way, not that way. So if we say things in a weird way, it's supposed to happen. It's like if you go to a yoga class and they ask you to do something and you do it, and you're like, whoa. That is the reason that we're doing it. We're not looking for the poses that are easy mentally. We're looking for the ones that are difficult, because the fact that they are difficult indicates something that is causing you to have experiences that you don't want. You know what I'm saying? And when you stretch that stuff out, right, when you kind of break those patterns, it becomes easy. How do I do indecisive? That's a weird question. Here's another way to put that. How do I make sense out of doing indecisive? Okay, that's all right. That's a little bit better. And then another way to ask that is, how do I make myself feel like being indecisive? How do I get myself to the point of feeling indecision? Because we tend to refer to indecision as a behavior, but it's really an experience, right? It's not even a feeling. It's not one feeling. It's not indecision is a feeling that I get right here in my finger, and this the top of my left pointer finger. And that's how I know when I can't make a decision. That's not how it is. It's like there might be a sensation somewhere in the body, but there's also meanings that are assigned. There's also patterns of scanning. I go, thought about what I want, then I do a big thought about what I don't want, then I say, oh man, okay, what about, and then I make my decision based on what I don't want. I make my decision based on what might go wrong. You know what I'm saying? I blow that out of proportion. I don't bother with probabilities. You know what I'm saying? I overlook the fact that indecision is a decision. I'm deciding not to decide and to sit here in indecision instead. So that's one thing I did is I created a sensation that it was possible for me to go off to the sideline like a football game. Like they're forever stopping the clock in football, and I feel kind of like a jerk anytime I use a sports analogy because I know nothing about sports. I feel like I haven't earned the right to use them, but I think there are sports, right, where the clock doesn't stop the whole time. Are there?
Yeah, I think so.
Like what?
Oh, like.
You don't know. If anyone knows, is there a sport where the clock never stops, that there's no timeout? Unless there's in football, though, the timeouts just happen. I mean, it's not even timeouts, is it? They stop and go all the time.
I don't know. I can't stand watching football because I think maybe basketball just kind of keeps going.
Does it?
Yeah. Football, you stop all the time.
My dad would watch football once in a while, and first of all, I'd say, why are you watching football? You don't watch sports. And the other thing was, it would say, here, we have 2 hours on the clock. And I was like, 2 hours, I can wait to play video games, But then it's like, that's not 2 hours. That's 2 hours of like 1, 2, okay, stop 5 minutes. You know what I mean? It was a terrible thing.
Yeah.
But I had a sensation that I could stop the clock on my life, and that if I just didn't choose, because I got really good at waiting, because I was ready to move out at like 4.5. I was ready to go, and you know what I had to do? I had to learn to wait, and I got too good at it. I got so good at it that when it was time for me to graduate high school, I didn't pay any attention to where I was going to go to college. And when I got to college, I hated it, and I didn't pay any attention to the fact that I didn't like it. And then I switched to another place, and I didn't pay attention to that, and I didn't pay attention to that, and I waited and waited and waited and waited and waited. And I went to chiropractic school, and you know what? Chiropractic school is a bit of a motherfucker. Chiropractic school is awful. It goes on and on and on forever. It's 4.5 years of 12.5-hour days, right? And you're like, learning.
Is it 3.5? 14 quarters?
Well, it took me 4.5. But anyway, you got really good at waiting there too. And then all of a sudden, the rug was pulled out from under me. Stop waiting, start doing. Do. And I was like, wait, hang on a second. I've spent the first 24 years of my life learning how to wait, and now you're telling me it's time to do so? I just got good at this. I just got where it didn't bother me. Do you know what I'm saying? And now it's time to do something different? Yeah, that's how it works. And I think that awareness is the way out of that. You know what I'm saying? Because awareness makes you nimble. Awareness frees you from this whole thing. Because like when I was growing up, and I think it is this way for a lot of people, you basically are like, God, I just want to be left alone. What do I have to do to please my parents? You know what I'm saying? And then you get it down about right. You got to look cute. You got to not scream too much. You got to da-da-da-da-da. And then you go off to school. And then you got other weird adults you got to deal with. God, what do I have to do to please my teachers? What do I want these kids to not make fun of me. I want to just be okay. I want to be able to just go in and sit down and relax. That's what I want. Like, how do I have to act for them to leave me alone, for her to be okay? And it's like, how do I please those people? How do I get them off my back? You know what I'm saying? What patterns do I learn to just get people to leave me alone? And then you go to high school and it becomes more demanding, because then I remember when it was like in 4th or 5th grade, it was when they started getting us used to having multiple different teachers. And I was like, you've got to be kidding me. I just figured out how to really work Miss Wright. Her name was Miss Wright, W-R-I-G-H-T. Like, I know what she likes and what she doesn't. I know when to joke and when to be quiet. And now I got to go see Miss Helms. Miss Helms is scary. I have no idea what Miss Helms likes. It seems like she doesn't even like that I exist. And, then you had to learn that, and you get better and better at that. And then, that web becomes increasingly complex. And so we get better and better at pleasing more and more groups of people. So we can have the sweet respite of going unconscious. But I think the thing that we kind of overlook is the fact that we are selling ourselves short. Because when we're pleasing everybody else, right, to keep them off our back, what we're doing is we are playing a satisfactory role in their lives. That does not create a satisfactory life for us. Playing a satisfactory role in the lives of other people is not going to create the kind of life that you want. Mm-hmm. But what happens at the end of your life? You say, look how hard I tried. I did everything I could to please everybody around me. Where's my money? Where's my success? Where are my fans? Where are my friends? Where are my family? Where are all of these people that I spent my whole life trying so hard to please? Well, they're all gone. You know what I'm saying? They're not there. You have to build your life too, and I think awareness really is the key to doing that. It's like baking that cake. It doesn't matter how hard I try to bake a cake with baking powder only. It's not going to work. Do you know what I'm saying? It doesn't matter how hard I try to create the life that I want, pleasing other people. It's not going to work. It's just not going to happen. It doesn't matter how many people I please. It's never going to happen. It's it might be unnecessary, but it's not a sufficient ingredient. Awareness, though, engagement with your process, with your life, brings that around. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Brings it to mind. And it snap. If you ever feel lethargic or unmotivated, or like you don't have these kind of aspirations or whatever, I guarantee you it's not because it's not in you. It's because so much of your mental hard drive has been taken up trying to please other people, or at least not piss them off, that you feel like you've got nothing left. The thing to do, though, is say, what would it take for me to not give a fuck about that anymore? What would it take for me to not to go and intentionally make people angry, but to not care? Because that mental RAM, that hard drive, when you free that up, you can actually go and start creating your life. Instead of trying to help other people be happy in a life that they don't like, you can actually go start creating the life that you like. And you become kind of like a force of nature, and you just let everyone else respond to you. It's like, when it rains outside, I don't get mad about it. I just go inside. Do some people get mad about rain? Well, yeah, they're kind of dumb. You know what I'm saying? That's not a smart way to go through life. Why don't you just let other people respond to you sort of like a force of nature? It's not personal. I'm just doing my thing. I'm just creating the life that I want. And you can be very conscientious of it. And actually, the more that you want, that you create in your life, the more it becomes possible for you to be conscientious of other people, to be helpful to other people. But you can't pour from the empty cup. You know what I'm saying? And you can't. I don't want anybody to give me anything, and for them to feel that I owe them something because of that. I don't want to subject anybody to my feeling of entitlement. I want to, if I'm going to give something to somebody, if I'm going to help somebody out, if I'm going to lend a hand or something like that, I make very sure that I can do it from a place of genuinely not feeling like I want to get anything back, because I don't want to subject myself and I don't want to subject them to it. I feel like it's like a courtesy thing. It's like if I'm going to feed you food, I owe it to you to make sure it's not poison. If I'm going to do you a favor, I owe it to you to make sure that there's not the arsenic of expectation in there. You know what I'm saying? Or, oh, I didn't realize it was there. Well, how well is that going to go over if I keep putting poison in your food through neglect? It's like at some point you're going to say, listen, no, you had a responsibility. And I think that I have a responsibility to you to be doing what I want to do, and then helping you second, or as a part of that, so that if you don't respond the way I want you to, it doesn't bother me. I don't feel entitled to a certain response from you or from anybody else. And I think that really just kind of freeing yourself up to create your life, and not worrying about all that crap anymore that life set us up to worry about, is a powerful thing. You don't know how powerful you are until you stop. You can partition hard drives on a computer. So you can have multiple things running on one computer, but the consequence of that is that one doesn't have as much power as the other. It's like the whole hard drive, an integrated hard drive, has a certain amount of space, a certain amount of power. If I partition it, if I cut it in half, all of a sudden it's got half. And if I'm half concerned with other people and half concerned with myself, I'm half as powerful. Versus if I'm like, okay, I'm going to create. And what's really interesting too is you'll notice that when you really start intentionally creating the kind of life that you want, a concern for the well-being of other people is a part of that. But it manifests in different ways, and it comes from a place of abundance rather than a place of scarcity and lack. And you give to people without setting them up to say, remember when I da-da-da, you know what I'm saying? When you integrate kind of like your service to other people into your own kind of life plan, it's just a more efficient way of doing things. It just works a lot better. But you have to have enough. You have to care about them enough to be indifferent to them long enough to care enough about yourself to be able to give them all the things that you'll be able to give them as a result of having been indifferent to them, caring about them enough to be indifferent to them long enough to give yourself the attention that's going to allow them to give all the things, to receive all the things that the full kind of you can give them. You know what I'm talking about? Mm-hmm. I think that's a powerful thing. It's once again far afield, but it all kind of comes together, I think. It's an awareness thing, really. We could have just left it at that.
Yeah, right? An hour ago. Well, we love you guys. If you love this stuff, if you're into the way that Steve's brain works and all of that wonderfulness, there are many ways for you to learn more of our kind of life philosophy. There's the Ever Better Life course. There is the Resolve community, which is focused specifically around resolving, becoming aware of what conflicts are made out of from the German New Medicine perspective. And so, there's journals in there, the workbooks, the notes, the videos. There's so much. Mirabella, actually, she's like, I was just with you guys for an hour in Resolve, and then she popped onto the video. So there's so many ways for you to...
That's impressive. That's an impressive...
Isn't that awesome?
I don't know, what is that? Patience? Is that endurance? I don't know what that is. That's impressive.
But there's so much awesome stuff that we have, these materials for you to peruse, to learn from. There's personal coaching. Let us know what you need. We love you. We think you're awesome. Have a lovely evening. Great rest of your weekend, and we'll see you again soon.
Good night. Thank you.